You could probably already tell by the title of this podcast, but just in case, a heads up. Adult language will definitely be making an appearance. So if you're at work, around the kids, or just in front of some judgy pets, you might want to grab some headphones. Here we go. Hey, it's Leslie, and welcome to My Effing Desk. My next guest is Adrienne Hedger. We had the best time during this conversation. I could just talk to her all day. You've probably seen her around on Hedger Humor. She's got a big following on Facebook and Instagram with her cartoons about craziness of everyday life. She's also a wealth of information, so you might want to grab a notebook for this conversation. She's got some great tips to jot down. The two of us talked about her leaving the corporate world for freelancing. We got real talking about making money as a working artist and also about dealing with trolls, finding the humor in the ridiculous aspects of life, and so many other things. Besides her delightful cartoons, Adrienne also writes greeting cards for Paper Rebel and Recycled Paper Greetings, and she works as a freelance writer for corporations as well. Adrienne has been featured in Huffington Post, Today Show Parents, BuzzFeed, Upworthy, Bored Panda. She's all over the place, y'all. So let's get started. Welcome, Adrienne Hedger. It's so good to meet you in person finally after all this time.
I know.
Adrienne and I worked together a few years ago on a little collaboration where she was doing this thing for a while where she was cartooning humor writers' words, posts and stuff. And God, that must have been like 3 or 4 years.
That was a long time, maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was a while because I remember my youngest was still a baby because that was one of the posts in the contention was her staring through the oven at the chocolate chip cookies.
Oh, yeah.
Eventually it won out, this post. I'll put it in the show notes for everyone to see, but this post about feigning concern over my son at having gotten injured for the 500th time. And Adrienne did this.
Oh gosh, that was so fun to draw. When I read I think it must've been a tweet or a post or something. I forget where I saw it, but I could immediately, I was like, I can picture that cartoon so clearly. So I was so happy that you collaborated.
You've said that before, right? That you kind of see your life in cartoons. That
I do. Yeah. And that was, from an early age, I remember I was out to dinner with my dad and stepmom, and I remember the waiter was like, would you like pepper, and on the salad, which I thought as a kid, I'm like, oh, this is funny. And my dad said yes. And he got the pepper. And then later that night I went home and I did a cartoon where like the waiter doesn't stop adding the pepper, and the pepper is getting everywhere. And it's like, I just remember, I always was sort of filing things away. Like, well, that'd be a funny, cartoon. Or
That's awesome. I mean, that leads perfectly into what the first question that I usually like to ask people is, creativity was kind of always part of your life, or was it something you came upon later? But for you.
Oh, yeah. No, it definitely was my preferred means of expression. I would say humor, kind of writing and drawing, a combination of because cartooning is fun, it's like writing and drawing all together. So yeah, that's always been my preferred way to communicate. And I would make little magazines for my family. I was constantly drawing cartoons. But, when I think back on it, it's interesting because I never really pictured myself doing it as a living. Like that was never in the plan. My mom was a teacher. My dad and stepmom were business consultants. I went to college and majored in communications. I got a job at Honeywell. It was just sort of like creativity was part of me. I loved it. And I expressed it with like friends and family, planning fun events or parties or making cards for people. And I did get into greeting cards. That's sort of a long time ago. I submitted a few ideas to the greeting card company on a whim and just sort of started a relationship with them. But it was purely a hobby. I was like, okay, in life, you move on and you like get the corporate job and but creativity was always part of it. It's not like I wasn't creative. I just never really thought of it as a way to kind of make a living. I'm surprised myself of what I'm doing now. Like I never it wasn't in the plan.
I mean, you left the corporate world.
I did. So I got into the corporate world. And interestingly, one of my first jobs was in corporate communications, like writing a magazine for the employees at Honeywell. And I was remembering back to my magazines when I was a little kid. I'm like, I'd love to put in like a cartoon or a fake advice column or so, they weren't really into that. But I left not to cartoon, but I left to start a freelance writing business, still writing for companies because we wanted to start a family. So there was a really intense period there where I had left my job, thought I had some work, and all of that fell through, as does happen in life. And so that first summer after I quit my job, I sort of envisioned it like, I'll have my coffee and I'll be writing up a storm. And it was just me sitting at my desk, like trying to swallow because it was I had no jobs, I had nothing. And so I fell back on something that I kind of do from time to time when I'm in a spiral like that is I made the simplest of plans and I called it the weekly money making machine. And I was like, okay. And this was all, again, geared toward writing at the time, corporate writing. And I was like, on Monday, I will research local companies. On Tuesday, I will call 5 people. On Wednesday, I'll email. And I just had a prescribed thing day to day. And it's like, that was as simple as it was. It was an anchor to like, get me to the desk. I knew what I was going to do. I just followed my own, it's like I made a plan and then I'm like, just follow the plan. And over time, I was able to scrape together like really little clients at first and it kind of built up. And then it built to be something that was taking up a whole lot of my time and actually sort of pushing out some of the more creative things I was doing. At the time, I was still doing some cards on the side and I'd started a blog where I was posting cartoons, probably for like my family to see, like no one really knew about it. But and then the corporate writing became so much. I remember I took a break from the cards and that was really hard because I was thinking the greeting cards that I submit and sometimes one would get on a shelf. It's like that was the only creative outlet that I had going but I had too much work. And I think there's times in life where you just can't do it all. And so I was like, I got to take a break. And I took like a 2-year break from submitting anything. And I was thinking at the time, like, well, that was fun. I guess it's over. I was really upset about it. But I did manage to, after I got the business going and the kids through their very, very young years, I reached back out to the card company and I just said, remember me and would you guys be open to submissions? And they said yes. And it was just a good lesson and reminder that things aren't necessarily done. They're not over. It's like you can take a pause and you can come back to something. From that point on, I have not had a break from them. And the cards have become a more serious part of my income at this point. But, for a long time, it was just a hobby. I kind of did these 3 gift books on a whim with a friend of mine who worked for American Girl magazine. And she had an agent. She's like, hey, could you illustrate these books and co-write them? And that sort of led to Nickelodeon reading or seeing one of those books. And they asked us to submit content to their Nick Mom Humor website. And that was like 2013. And I remember that was a huge turning point for me because that's the first time someone was basically saying to me, we will pay you to give us cartoons. And I was like,
that's a big moment.
Yeah. I'm like, what is this? This cannot be. This cannot be. But a funny thing happened because this like creativity that I had, and I had so much joy in like making all these cards and cartoons privately. But once someone wanted to pay me, for a little while, it became like a panic situation. And it sort of stripped the fun out of it in a way, because I was like, oh no. I was convinced like that I was going to run out of ideas after about 4 months. I'm like, I got 4 or 5 months, then they're going to—
the jig is up. They're going to be on to me.
I was like, they're going to know I'm out of ideas. I'm just going to have to exit gracefully. I was really petrified. And the money is part of what made me scared, and it was interesting to be sort of on the hook for that. But over time, I realized I'm not going to run out of— I keep having ideas. Mm-hmm. And part of that is just being around kids all the time. It was actually, I like settled into like this, maybe I can actually do this, because I really felt like I had no business giving anyone any of my cartoons. It's nothing I'd done, and Nickelodeon was such a big name. I was like, I don't know if I can do that.
I feel like that is such a big lesson that I hear over and over again from creatives. And mm-hmm. I think particularly with women, sort mm-hmm. of not trusting. It's like a weird form of imposter syndrome, I think.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah. Like, you can't possibly be right. You can't let me tell you why you should not pay me for my work. All right.
Know, that's so true.
And I think it's good for people to hear that you got out of it. You came through that. The ideas did not dry up. It just flourished from there. And it is just sort of getting out of your own way.
And part of it is that whole thing. And you kind of have to do this. You're forced into it, but just that showing up every day, being scared, showing up, doing it. And over time, it's like, it just kind of wears away. And you're like, yeah, I am doing this, and then over time, fast forward many, many years, I'm like, not only am I doing this, but I should be asking more money for this. You know what I mean? Like, this is working and people are liking it. And like, this has value that is meaningful to the company I'm providing it to, And so it really, in time, I grew into that. But at first it was a serious kind of crisis for me. I also had the little kids at that time too. And I was like, do I seize this? Like, how far do I go with it?
And how did that work when they were so little?
That is when they were really little. That's when I took a break from submitting greeting cards.
Yeah.
I just had to. I just was so tired. It's like, I couldn't even think of any good ideas, So I also look back at that time, cartoons that I was posting on my little private blog, and they're hilariously like quickly drawn, and the coloring, it's like, I'm coloring outside the lines. I don't even remember making some of these. It's like, I think I was just working super hectically in between naps. I mean, remember when you put the kid down for a nap and you think you're going to have like an hour and a half and then like 15 minutes later, like, and you're just like, oh no, those cartoons from that era, which again, were just posted on my personal blog, crack me up because it was clearly someone in a panic trying to get their idea down. I mean, I feel bad.
Their diapers
off. Like, go. It's like, maybe I had them color it. I don't remember, but it is not good. Because I was as everyone does, I was struggling with like, how do I work with the little kids? So I spent a whole year waking up at 4:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm going to do that 4:30 to 6 o'clock thing. And you know what? It works. But the trade-off is that you are so tired. You have to go to bed so early that you don't feel like you have a life, because by the time the kids go down, you're ready to go down. And then you wake up to work again. I don't know. It does work, but it's a sacrifice.
I've never been able to do that. You hear that over and over again, but I'm a super night owl. I mean, even now I still, I just can't go to bed early and I can't get up early, but people swear by it. I think that one of the things though, that is sort of heartening to hear is that you can't even remember it that clearly, because even though in the moment it feels so long and like it'll never end, now your girls are teenagers and you're kind of course they still, need you and there's all these demands placed on you, but it's different.
Oh, it's so much easier the older they get. If you can hold on each day, okay. Then you're clawing and inching your way toward like everything getting easier. Before COVID, there were times when Jack and I were like, are the kids even home? They're 14 and 17 now. And it's like, they just live their lives. It is so much easier. And the early days, they are a blur to me. And I remember there were times when I just had to say, especially working on those little gift books that I did with my friend, there were times when I had to say to the family, like, this is going to be 2 months where you're not going to see me, and there are times like that. And it's like, they bonded. It's not the worst thing for the family to be without you. It always would make me uncomfortable, but then I'd realize, oh, well, they're bonding and doing their things and, and it was all fine. But there were times, when they were young, when I just had to be like, no one can bother me. And they still do bother you, but it's like, you kind of have to, put that foot down for certain projects and certain things. But I can tell you this, one thing I'm really happy I did through that blur, I kept notes about everything. And so, and it was the simplest thing. I would just either jot it down, record a voice memo, email myself, whatever. If the kids did something funny or I had an idea or just anything that sort of sparked any creativity in me, I would write it down. And now I have this treasure trove. Now that I have time, I can go back and look through these notes and it's like, oh, I wouldn't have remembered any of this.
It's like a supply and demand kind of thing.
Totally.
Like at that age, they're full of supply. Yes. You don't have the time to create it. So
that's exactly it. I thought when Kate leaves for college, what am I going to do? And I go, oh, I have basically from her ages 7 to 10, I have so much material. It's I'm just jotting down the essentials. I'm not writing a story or nothing like that. It's like, I'm just getting the essentials down or funny things they say. So that's something I kind of did on a whim out of desperation, thinking I would develop those ideas, never had time. And I'm so grateful now. Do it when it happens. Cause even I'd be like, oh, I'll write that down later. Nope. I would forget,
No, because your brain is a sieve. At that age, like
Totally
you're thinking of animal crackers and play dates and all that. There's no, I'll remember it later. It will not happen.
No, there's nothing like that. And then the other thing is I also don't really try to tidy my house up or do, it's all about choices. And so if you came here, I would like quick make it look okay. But like I've kind of given that up. The house looks okay, but it's not like squeaky clean. And then the garden, like the plants are not doing, it's just like, you can't do it all. Back to that idea.
Absolutely. You cannot do it all. For some reason, it feels so sexist, but the house thing always bothers me. And especially when other women come. Yeah. And I'm just like, I'll have to stop and tell myself, do you want to be the kind of mom that has a perfect house? Nothing wrong with that. Just a choice. Do you want to have a perfect house or do you want to have a creative life?
Oh my gosh, that's exactly it. And I will choose the latter every time. Every time.
I don't care if my kids remember that things did not look spick and span.
Yeah.
But I want them to remember a joke I wrote or the fact that I started a podcast with no experience. Those are things I want to be passing on to them.
The more you allow sort of fun to enter into the house and you're not so uptight about things, like the more observations I can make about my kids and then do a cartoon that reminds people of their kids, So it's so boring to just be like, Clara woke up on time and dressed appropriately and got to school. Like, that's not fun. You know what I mean?
Relatable.
Yeah. Like
exactly. We don't want to hear how perfect everything is. Everyone is slogging through this together and it helps to laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. So speaking of using your family for content, which is basically the primary reason we all have kids. We all know.
Yeah.
You've said before that you kind of check in with them now, being older, that you got to kind of get the clear.
I do.
Totally makes sense. What do they think about all your work?
Well, they like it, and their friends follow along, which is primarily why I have to check in with them. I've watched them. I'll sit there and I see them like scroll by. They don't even really read the cartoon so much. They'll just do like a quick double tap. Like, I'm like, well, at least read it. If they're in it, they might read it. And Kate said she can tell right away if there's a cartoon about her because the character will be rolling her eyes, or like she can tell by the facial expressions that it's a cartoon about her. And then she'll read it. But yeah, they like the other day I had one about Claire. She told me she wanted to broadcast her burps all over the house with like a really loud microphone. And I'm like, can that be a cartoon? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, all right. Cause it's about you like burping really loud. No, and she's like, yeah, you can do that. So I do run it by them and get their permission, but I do miss the freewheeling days of just being able to do it. When they were toddlers, that was like the golden era for my cartooning. Yeah. And as hard as it was to get the work done, it was like, they didn't have a say.
Right.
And they were being so ridiculous that it was like just content. It was writing itself like every hour,
I miss that too. I should have taken better notes. Yeah. I still got some time with the 5-year-old.
Five is great. The cartooning in a way has helped me cope with every stage of them because, a lot of my cartoons are actually about things that are frustrating or whatever. And so in the moment, it's actually not funny. It's just frustrating, and it's just like annoying or whatever it is. But part of me, in addition to being annoyed, is always thinking like, is this a cartoon? And so in a sense, it's like the cartooning allows me to kind of observe my own life from the outside kind of, and it's almost like I'm reporting on it in a way. And so it separates the emotion a little bit because I'm always thinking, well, I can turn this into a cartoon and like, what's funny about this? Or like, I'm looking at it that way. So I never expected this part of it either, but it is a coping mechanism for me. And I hope and think that when I put the cartoons out, it helps other people cope too. Cause you're like, yeah, things are hard and like upsetting, but there's also sort of a funny shared experience side to the whole thing too, So
I think that illustrates so beautifully the whole point of art and creativity. Sometimes, especially in our society, we look at it as extra or it could be fluff or just kind of, well, that's a nice to have, but being able to step outside a situation and see the ridiculousness of it, looking at it a bit more objectively, and then kind of processing it through, in your case, cartooning.
Yeah.
That seems really healthy to me. It feels like that's better than, the way maybe our grandparents' generation would have coped with.
Oh, yeah. I find a lot of comfort in looking at all the funny things out there. The people that you and I follow, I turn to humor all the time to like cope and just manage life. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. I don't think it's anything on the side. It's sort of the heart of the matter. It's how you look at the world and how you get through the day, so it can help with that.
Do you have kind of switching over to like your work habits and stuff? How do you set that up? Do you have like a certain amount of time that you try to draw? Do you have a certain number of ideas you like to work through?
Yeah. So I always have a cartoon that I want to get done for the next day. I don't like to go more than like 2 days without a new cartoon. So I usually have a cartoon that I'm working on, and sometimes it'll become a little more complicated and take more time. But usually in a day, I want to get a cartoon done. I also still do the freelance writing. And so I think this is another important point, is that like my cartooning could not sustain what our family needs. That is not enough income. So I still do my corporate freelance writing. And so every day, like for instance, today I'm going to be working with a client on like launching their employee intranet. And then after that, I'm going to draw like a really crazy picture for this game I'm doing on Instagram, where I just pick a bunch of random words out of a bowl, and I'm going to draw like a really crazy picture. And then tonight, after dinner, I'm going to work on a cartoon that I would like to post tomorrow. So it's sort of a mix of everything. At the end of the day, I have a cartoon drawn, and then I wake up to color it, because I always feel like when I wake up early, it's like I don't really want to do any heavy lifting at that point. So I usually wake up, color the cartoon I drew last night, post that, do some corporate work, and then come back to maybe my Instagram game. And it's throughout the day, it's kind of back and forth. So
I'm really glad that you brought that up, that you have a mix of jobs, especially, when people see how many followers you have on Instagram and Facebook, and you're kind of everywhere, to know that it still takes some other income to make this work. And
it certainly does, because there's not, the things I post online are free, essentially. They do lead to cards, like the really good ones. If someone loves a certain cartoon, I'll pitch that as a card. And sometimes I can make money if that card gets on shelves. And then there are corporate clients who see my work online and ask me to create cartoons for their business. It does, like I said, it functions as a marketing tool for me to showcase what I'm able to do. But yeah, I think it's important to know that I have other ways of making money as well. Like in no way am I this wildly successful cartoonist that all I do is make cartoons all day and post them, online. I definitely need these other jobs to pay the bills. And I don't think that's uncommon.
I don't think it is at all, but I think that people just starting out don't know that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that they do think that if I just get big enough, then I can have it all. I can do, and maybe you can. It's not like you shouldn't shoot for it, but I think there's value also in doing it for the love of it, and to have other options, to have something outside of your day job.
I find it very comforting to have multiple sources of income, because that way, if any one thing collapses entirely, the other thing is still there. And these are so wildly different. I mean, the corporate writing I do is hilariously different from my cartooning, but I kind of like that. I think it's a nice balance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I work a similar way of switching it up. I do this in the morning, this in the afternoon, and that works well when you got a lot of balls in the air.
Do you work evenings and weekends too? Because I just sort of am constantly like doing a little work, and I don't know. I don't feel like I really have a week necessarily. It's just sort of my life is a combo of like different things I'm doing. I don't know.
Absolutely. I try not to do anything on the weekends because my kids are still young and around.
My kids have ditched me, so I'm free to.
I'm secretly waiting for those days, I think, in a way. But it can easily ooze over into everything for sure. So I have to kind of make myself not. Now, when I'm doing a show and I'm performing in a musical, that's all.
Oh, yeah. That's so great. Yeah. That's back to that whole like, hey, this is a season of, busyness, and there's a beginning and end, but it's going to be intense. Yeah.
How has the pandemic changed the way you're creating?
Well, I would say at first it really threw me, and I was like, this isn't funny. I was really freaked out. And, but then I just started drawing how I felt and what was happening. And it's sort of, some cartoons are not laugh out loud. They're just mildly amusing, and so I was kind of venturing into territory that wasn't as like, oh, that's funny. It was more like, that type of like. But yeah, I would say like it's actually given me a little boost in ideas, just because having my family around me this much, it's like we're driving each other crazy. And so any time in my life where things are kind of annoying, or I'm feeling like, I just know that that's a cue of like, okay, you can create some stuff out of this because other people are feeling this way too. So it's like, what's the universal truth? What's the cartoon I can do? So just from a personal standpoint, being around my family and having the kids around all the time, it's actually led to like more ideas for me. I certainly do not want this pandemic to continue. I wish it wasn't here.
Right.
But
Give me less ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Fewer ideas.
Yeah. Fewer ideas. I would love to go back to where we were. And part of it is we're all sharing in this experience, as humans. And so pandemic cartoons are seeming to resonate because we're all struggling with it. So
yeah, finding some way to laugh about it.
It's exactly. Yeah.
Like the only thing that gets you through. So I heard that when you met your husband, you knew exactly how you would draw him. Like that was one of your first thoughts is I know exactly how I would draw you. So the question is, have you ever cut a relationship short with someone that you just like the relationship was fine, but you were like, I don't know how to draw you.
This like, what would I even do with you drawing you? Yeah.
This isn't gonna work.
Shoot, no, although it factored a little bit into the dog I chose at the at the local shelter. I was like, oh, okay, this dog, that dog. And then when I saw our dog that we got, I was like, that's exactly how I would draw a dog. So in a way that like sort of tipped the scales toward JJ. So while I haven't broken up with anyone, I have started a relationship with a dog based on him being very drawable. Yeah.
He is totally drawable. I mean, like I haven't seen a real picture, but he pops out of the page for sure. He does. So one of my favorite cartoons that you've drawn was one you sent out in your newsletter a few months ago about the different types of commenters.
Oh yeah.
And it was just great. I'll put it in the show notes, but there's like the person with verbal diarrhea who just
the person who's judging you. That sort of was born out of if I'm on the phone with someone who's really bugging me, I find that I will sketch them and I don't know what they look like. So it's more about the expression I'm giving them, it's more about the facial expression, but I will sit there and while they're talking, I will sketch them. And I thought, this could, and then it sort of takes the annoyance out and it becomes this really amusing situation where I'm like looking at this person I've drawn and like listening to them. And so I thought, maybe I can turn some of the negative, and it's funny. It's like trolls are everywhere. My stuff is so lighthearted. And yet still there are people who find a way to be like mean or rude or confrontational, which is so shocking. But I thought, well, maybe I can turn this into something amusing by drawing what these people are. And then when I encounter one of those comments, I can refer to my sheet. I can be like, oh yes, it's you, like I remember you. And that's actually has really kind of helped me. Again, it's that idea of like taking life, putting it into a cartoon and observing it that way, so that you're not feeling personally attacked anymore by this person. You're like, oh yes, I remember this commenter,
Right. Well, because you read the comments, right?
I read what I can on my comments. So on Facebook and Instagram and my website, I never, ever, ever read comments. Like if the HuffPost does anything or any other outlet posts my cartoons, I absolutely do not read those comments. And that came from working with Nick Mom. Like, you have to be really careful reading comments. If it's a place you trust, and then do it, because there's some great interactions you can have. If it's just out in the general whatever of the web, I really wouldn't go reading the comments. There's just nothing to be gained.
No, there's nothing to be gained. It's a good way of putting it.
There's sort of an interesting aspect of like getting feedback on your creative endeavors. Okay. So when I started working with the card company, they were very, very upfront about feedback. And they would tell me like, this isn't funny. It feels like you're trying too hard. They just were very blunt. And part of it was they were trying to get to a really good product. And the rejection rate is super high in the card submission world. So most things were rejected. And then I learned over time that it's not a personal thing. Like it doesn't mean I'm not funny. It doesn't mean I'm not creative. It just means like work harder or try this, try that. Same thing in the Nick Mom world. We had an editor and he would say sometimes like, this isn't quite there. I feel like it's, you're trying, but it's not quite there. And we'd work on it and make it better. So I do think there's value in obviously helpful feedback. And I've grown creatively listening to that, but it does take a while to like, let your ego kind of absorb that stuff and realize it's not personal. It's just, we're trying to get to a good product.
It's like the best compliment you can get is, I have no notes on this.
Yes.
I'm like, no notes, but what did you think? What cute little thing? No notes.
No notes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
It's not personal. Like you said,
it's not. And
it's a business.
it's the business of being creative and funny, and you're there to like pitch ideas and the stuff. It's just, you have to develop a thick skin, and that helps later when you get bad comments online, because it's just like, oh, okay, like I don't know who you are, but I can handle that because I've been told by, the people I actually work with that like this thing's not funny and we got through it and whatever. But early on, it can really kind of hurt and throw you.
And it separates, if you don't get that thick skin and get the objectivity and take it so personally that this is a part of me, a criticism of my work is a criticism on me, then...
That's a really good point, Leslie, because I was told by the card company, they enjoyed working with me because I didn't take anything personally. I was always open to what they said. And they've worked with people who have left because they've gotten feedback. Can you imagine, like, they just wouldn't even pursue that as a fun thing to do because it's like someone didn't like their idea. And I mean, I can see that because I know how they're feeling, but you can't do that. You have to stick with it. It's not personal. It feels personal.
It feels personal.
It's you. You're putting yourself out there. But yeah. What I do now is I create something that amuses me. Okay. And this isn't for paid work. This isn't for clients. Obviously for them, I will do exactly what they want. But for my own things I'm posting on my sites, my goal is to amuse myself. And if I've done that, then I will put it out into the world. And then my thinking is, then it's the world. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm putting it out there. Everyone's going to make it their own. That's fine. It's sort of like out of my hands at that point. And I've amused myself and therefore I've achieved my goal, And so some of my favorite cartoons that I've put out haven't gotten as much response as other ones, but it's like, they're my favorites to me, and it's like, I like them the best. And then other ones I put out that get a whole lot of response. I'm like, well, that was okay, but like, it's not my favorite, you know what I mean? And so I kind of privately just do it for me. And then I'm sort of fascinated to see what happens when they're out there. And it is interesting to see if people like it or don't, or have comments. But I really try to separate that out from like any sort of measure of success personally, because all I can do is do what I think is good,
I love that, of amusing yourself first. I mean, that's the whole point. That's been kind of a recurring theme through this conversation. It can't be these outward signs of success of making a full-time living off of it or getting so many likes or followers or comments. It's about you and living your life in the way that you choose.
Yeah. And that goes back to the earliest days when like I was happy just making things for friends and family. I'm really happy making things for the public, but it's just who I am and I would have done it anyway. Do you know what I mean? And so however it worked out, I would have enjoyed cartooning and that would have been in my life. I think you are who you are and like go whatever your passion is, do it because that's going to make your life that more rich. And it sort of doesn't matter as much like whether you are wildly successful or not. It's just like, that's going to make your life richer and you a more interesting, fun person.
And help you to bear it too.
Oh, heavens. Yes.
I'm going to sneak in one more question before we go to the lightning round because we got to talk about Great British Baking Show.
Great British Baking Show. Okay. Oh my gosh. My family fell in love. We've only seen Collection 1. Okay. They call it a collection, right?
Yes.
So we watched Collection 1 during lockdown. The four of us have never loved a show as much as we've loved this show. Like it was, and we watched Collection 1. So it was Mary Berry and Paul. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Yeah. Paul Hollywood. And it's like, I was like, cake week, like bread week. What is happening right now? And the tent's so beautiful. It's like pastel color, the accents. I mean, the whole thing.
It's so soothing.
It's so soothing. Oh,
I heard from John Oliver that he said that it is not soothing to him at all because he knows all the idiosyncrasies of the British culture and he can tell how nervous they are. And so it just makes him feel their anxiety. And I'm like, well, I don't know any of that. All I know is the pastels, the pretty cooking bowls.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And it's so funny. The things they'll be like, this week you're making, like, we don't even recognize anything that they're making. Like, what are they doing? And then they'll do the showstopper challenge, and they are making like, I think one person like basically made an amusement park out of like lemon curd, and I'm like, what is happening? it's just the most wonderful show. We watched that. We loved it. We looked forward to it all day. We talked about it. The kids were baking that whole time. They were like baking things. It was a magical time.
That's wonderful. I can't wait till you move on to some of the other collections.
Yeah.
Then once, spoiler alert that Mary Berry is not on it anymore. Someone else. So.
But are they all that good then? Would you say like you're delighted by every collection that
I'm still delighted. It's not the same without Mary. I miss Mary a lot, but it is still very soothing and exciting. So I definitely still watch it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. One thing about the people on the Great British Baking Show is that similar to what you and I have been talking about, these folks have other day jobs. They are bakers because they have a passion for it. And it just kills me. Like they're construction workers and teachers and college students. And it's like, my gosh. And then they're coming here to bake this stuff. Like, I think it goes back to what we were talking about with like having something in your life that's creative, you know?
Yeah. One of them, one season was like a jail warden. Like he had this big old scar on his forehead and he would make the most delicate flower work. And you're thinking, really? But yeah.
I love that so much. I love it so much.
It's for the love of it. It's the joy. Let's jump into the lightning round.
Yes.
Okay. What is your effing desk? Your creative area? It could be physical or otherwise. That's just yours.
Mine is my iPad and my little iPad pencil, and no one can touch it. And that is my world, and I carry it around anywhere I need to go. You take it with you everywhere? I do. I take it in the car. If I'm waiting for anyone, I've got that thing with me and I'm drawing. It is my entire world. If I lost that, I don't know what I would do.
Okay. What is keeping you sane right now?
Okay, I've been listening to the John Mayer Trio band, and that's a blues rock band fronted by John Mayer. I'll do the John Mayer Trio radio channel, and then I open up my little New York Times mini crossword app, and just those two things together, like that soothes me from any sort of stress.
That's amazing. What is your best life hack?
Buy yourself an action figure. Maybe the wrestlers are good. Okay, go to the toy section and get like an action figure and then pose that little guy around the house. And you don't have to, it's like you can move him and pose him wherever you want. You can get the kids in on it. Your husband doesn't have to be every day, but we have a little Lego figure and we'll just kind of move him around and have him do funny things. And it's just such a nice counterbalance to like any stress during the day that you come across this character and it's like, oh, someone set him up like near the cereal, and it's just sort of like a little happy little thing. As a family, it's kind of a fun thing to do. It's like an elf on the shelf.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, it's like an elf on the shelf.
Elf on the shelf.
Yeah, that you can touch and everyone can play with. So that's really that's fun. Been. I love that. That's added some silliness to our house. Yeah.
If you could do anything besides what you're doing right now, what would it be?
I would be running a farm full of rescue dogs, and I would give tours of that farm to little kids. And then I would read a book to all of the dogs and all of the kids at the end of the tour.
And if you can't draw them, they're out. Like, they're not allowed on the rescue.
I would pre-screen them for whether or not I could draw them.
You got too many triangles in your face. Get out. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Someone told me to read the poem Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. I turn to that poem a lot. It's wonderful. Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. And it just is very centering.
What is the worst advice you've ever gotten?
The hairdresser told me to try the Japanese hair straightening procedure. She said, and then you can cut your hair really short into a shag do. So I had like stick straight, short, sticking out hair. And let me tell you, it took years to recover. So it's not good advice. It was not good.
Fill in the blank. Imposter syndrome is
something every human struggles with, even the most accomplished among us. So we are not alone in feeling that way.
Yes. It's so true. The more I read about successful people, period, just across the board.
I saw a tweet that Queen, after Live Aid in 1985, they thought they're like, well, we did okay. Like they were all worried. And it was like one of the best performers. Like, guys, if Queen feels that, we all, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean that you're an imposter. It's just a natural thing to feel.
At first, I thought you said the Queen. And I was like, I don't know.
No, the Queen played it live.
I know she's got imposters.
Yeah, maybe we may have found the one person.
What was the last thing you read?
Well, I'm reading right now this book called Creativity, A Short, Cheerful Guide, and I'm almost done with it. It's by John Cleese of Monty Python and Fawlty Towers. And what's great about it is he talks about creativity for anyone, no matter what your job or who you are. And he talks about what he does to feel creative. It's really good. It's very, very short, and it's delightful.
I am adding it to Goodreads as we speak.
Yeah, you'll like it.
Good. If you could have a song played every time you entered a room, what would it be?
I would say Beethoven's Fifth. Dun, 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 dun. Because I feel like the drama of that would be hilarious, because I'd end up making a piece of toast or doing something like that. But there'd always be a question like, is this going to be the time when something dramatic happens? Like, you know what I mean? You can't help but be like, ah. So I just think I kind of want that now. Like, I kind of want that to happen. But
what is next on your bucket list?
Well, okay, this would be after COVID, but I would love to go to a concert at the Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado. Yeah, it's someplace I've always wanted to go to see a band play. And the band would have to be very sort of guitar-y and lots of guitar and singing. So I was thinking like maybe the Indigo Girls or the John Mayer Trio Band, but something, yeah, I really, really want to do that. And especially now, like missing that stuff so much. So at some point.
Hopefully won't be too long.
I know.
Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I feel like I learned so much.
So yeah. I feel like we could talk for a long, long time, but
we definitely could. Something that I think we forget sometimes about creativity and art is that the purpose should be to amuse ourselves first, as Adrienne put it. It's so easy to get caught up in deciding whether or not we're legit creatives, if we're making a full living off of it, if we have the right number of followers, if people have said the right things about it. All that stuff is nice, but if we're not amusing ourselves, then what's the point? You can find out more about Adrienne on her website. It's hedgerhumor.com. That's Hedger with a D. She's also on Facebook /Hedger Humor and on Instagram and Twitter at Adrienne Hedger. Before we go, I wanted to share another comment that we got. This one is from Lindsay on Instagram. She said, I finally got a chance to listen to this because #busy mom life. Hear that, girl. Excellent podcast. I love Ellie's slam on Stephen King's privilege to have all the time in the world to write and the reminder to fill your cup even if the house needs cleaning. So in the same spirit, I'm going to go paint instead of writing a menu for next week. I love it. She's talking about episode 1 if you missed it with Ellie Lennon. I love hearing success stories. So if you have any success stories, however big or small, email them to me at myeffingdeskpodcast@gmail.com. Hey, while you're at it, why don't you go check out the website, myeffingdeskpodcast.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at myeffingdeskpodcast and on Twitter at myeffingdeskpod. And hey, if you're liking what you're hearing, please leave us a review and a rating. That would help so much for new people to find the podcast. That's it for now. We'll see you next time. And until then, go shake some shit up.